Hi, Internet. You're listening to episode 5 of Open Paren, a podcast about librarians and code. You can catch the complete show notes, including links to whatever we end up talking about today, at thatandromeda.github.io/open_paren, where you can also suggest guests and catch up on previous shows. And in fact, Margaret is the first guest I have who has been suggested by someone else. Thanks, Francis. Now we'll find out what he wanted me to talk to you about. It'll be great. So today we are talking to Margaret Heller, who is a digital services librarian at Loyola University Chicago. She is also a writer for the ACRL Tech Connect blog and an active participant in both LIDA and Code for Lib, and a board member of the Read Write Library Chicago. And I actually wanted to talk about that last one first because I was there a couple years ago when Midwinter was in Chicago, and it was amazing. But I have no idea what you've been up to since then, and it's super cool. And so how about telling the internet what is up with that and what you're doing lately?
Okay, yeah, sure. So the Read Write Library Chicago, for those who aren't familiar, is a independent library of works created by and for Chicago. So basically people who live in Chicago or write stuff about Chicago. And it's very community driven, volunteer driven. And, we've been working on a variety of different projects, like going out into the community and having kind of materials about those communities available to people there to kind of come in and talk about what their relationship is to them, contribute back more items. So that's been kind of going, we call those pop-up libraries. That's been going on. Right now we're kind of trying to transition a little bit to some more sustainable models of recruiting a new board, doing some other kind of development work to try to development in terms of money and time and that kind of stuff, as opposed to like technical development, which is kind of what I've been working on before. So, a lot of changes going on with that, but still going strong and still there for people, and in a rapidly gentrifying community, but still trying to make sure that we're part of the community that we're in to get the stories of people who are actually there.
So does this mean that listeners who are in Chicagoland and interested in the library should contact you about getting involved?
Oh yeah, absolutely. readwritelibrarychicago.org or readwritelibrary.org, sorry. And then I know you'll have it in the show notes as well, but then that will be the place to go to get the information about volunteering. I don't do a lot of really hands-on day-to-day work anymore. I'm more at work, kind of big picture things. But there are a lot of people who are volunteering who are doing the kind of hands-on, like, this is when you need to show up to volunteer, this is when the meetings are. So we can get you in touch with those people.
Yeah, when I was there, I was really struck by how like DIY and participatory it was. It reminds me of, do you know Stuart Brand's book, How Buildings Learn?
Yeah.
Yes. So where he talks about like high road versus low road buildings. So you have your like extremely fancy, impressive civic buildings, which are things like libraries and City Hall, which are there to be like amazing and beautiful and stuff. And they're gorgeous, but they're hard to modify because people feel kind of intimidated by those spaces, and they may be actually physically built in ways that are hard to modify. And then you have your low road buildings that are things that are maybe a little grittier, but that means that people feel totally comfortable with experimenting and like repartitioning the space and doing stuff with it and being creative. And it felt like that latter to me, where people can like take ownership and be creative and do cool things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one way that we make money, is because doing space rentals, because it is a very easily configurable space, and it is like legal to have, like it meets all code requirements for catering and so on. From that point of view, it like actually can function as that space legally, but then at the other hand, we also can configure it really easily and do different things with it. And so it makes that possible. So it's not a huge space, but we can do a lot with that small amount of space.
So people with money should rent your space. It'll be great. Awesome. Let's see. I also wanted to ask you about what exactly digital services librarian means in your context at Loyola, because that can mean so many different things. So which things does it mean for you?
Oh yeah, it's so funny the distinction between like a web services librarian or a digital services librarian and the libraries that have both. I was like, I'm curious, like what does one person do versus the other? Like my job description looks basically the same when I transferred. I used to be a web services librarian, now I'm a digital services librarian. It's a very similar job description, but so what I describe that as being for me is I'm kind of in charge of the front end stuff that users see, whether it's the look and feel of the website, the look and feel of the discovery layer, the content in the institutional repository, though not the, I don't do any backend stuff. That's all, it's a vendor hosted thing. So I don't do everything, I don't do all the cataloging and all that for our books as well. So it's a little bit of a weird distinction, but basically it's like the front end web development and scholarly communications, especially in terms of the institutional repository, though there's a large group of people who work on various scholarly communication projects, but I kind of oversee a lot of that in my role. So, and other things that come up now and then, but I have do increasingly more back-end stuff because of we've moved to a new ILS and discovery layer, which means I have to touch the back end of things a lot more than I ever used to, but that's good. That's fine. It's, whatever other web apps that come along that people need installed or fixed or modified. We have things going back to, 15, 20 years. Most of those retired, but over the last couple of years, it was like, get this Cold Fusion site from 2000 updated that needed some TLC. So that's the kind of thing where, just whatever comes along that people touch that's digital that needs some work, I will take a look at. And sometimes I'll say I'm not the best person to do this and put them in touch with the right person who is. But sometimes I'll just say, oh, yep, I'll get this working for you.
So how much control do your systems actually provide you over the front end development, the look and feel that you're trying to do? So I know that varies widely and some cases requires sort of gross hacks.
Yeah, I mean, we have, so our website runs on Drupal. Drupal is kind of my favorite platform to work on. So that one we can do a lot of modification on. We also we run a lot of things. We run Drupal, WordPress, Omeka, things I'm forgetting, but those are kind of our some of our big ones that we use. We also run Live Guides as a SpringShare product that's hosted, but we've been able to do a lot of modification to that, which I've written about before, the process of that. And then our ILS is Alma, or it's sort of it does a lot more than just traditional ILS, but Alma from Ex Libris, and then that runs along with Primo, which is the discovery layer, which we've also been able to modify a fair amount. Not as much as I would like necessarily, but I've done a lot more to it than I know a lot of sites do. A couple things that were really important to me to happen that we made happen. And then we have a lot of custom things that we've created over the years. We're fortunate in having a systems administrator who kind of keeps our servers going and gets things set up for us that we need. So if we need, if we want to experiment with like a new platform, we are generally pretty easily able to get like the virtual machine set up that we need or whatever we need set up, that he does that. And so we can build a lot of things in-house. It's just, we've been trying to move away from that a little bit though over the last couple of years, because as the kind of vendor products have become better in some cases or do stuff that we just don't feel like trying to do in-house, we've moved away from that. We used to have a lot more servers, a lot more people back in the day, but it's just not necessary anymore. So we're doing less of that, but we still have quite a few custom applications that run in-house that we still have to keep going as well. So those, of course, we have to maintain those ourselves and make them look decent ourselves. So it's a struggle that I enjoy. Like I really, without having, of course, you have to do sometimes bad hacking to make things look good, but it's really important to me that things kind of have a unified feel to them, and that they also, have a look to them. People will want to use them. I don't want to have a lot of things that look too the interface looks challenging for people. I want them to feel comfortable feeling like I can use this to have a better experience. And we're like a long way from really being there, but we've gotten better over the last couple of years, kind of unifying our look and feel across all our platforms and making sure things work together a little bit more seamlessly.
Do you have any particular techniques? Like, do you guys have a style guide or a set of like usability principles you try to adhere to accomplish these ends?
Yeah, well, we do have a couple things that we use that are kind of style guides. So like we do try to follow, we don't have to, we're again fortunate to not have to be on our university's CMS. So we have the flexibility to pick our own, our own platform, which we pick Drupal, and pick our own branding that can be somewhat different. But we do try to match that. We're currently not, our library website does not match our university's website at all. And our university's website actually is better, I would say, in many ways. So that's something I'm moving towards. So we kind of look at what they're doing, follow their standards as much as we can. And then we do a lot of usability testing and a lot of kind of observational work through analytics or other things to try to figure out what's working for people. But I would say our usability testing, we try to do it, we claim we do it 3 times a semester. That would be nice if that was actually how often we did it. But we definitely do it at least 4 times a year. And we bring in people to use all our things to kind of just see what they say about it. So, do they say it? Do they mention that they like the look of it? Do they mention they don't like the look of it? A lot of people come and say, oh yeah, the library website is kind of ugly or it's kind of plain. And then we ask, kind of, well, what would you like to see, or, what would be different? And so we use that information to kind of help us plan what we want to do. And also just see if people can't use things, then we see what's wrong with the design that they're not able to follow. Either what's wrong with the design or what's wrong with the services we're offering that they can't figure out what they're looking for. So then we try to go in and modify that. And we, again, with analytics too, we kind of see like what's being used. Is it possibly because of where it's placed on the page? Is it possibly because of some other thing that's going on, with that page? So we'll use that. And then we're very much not as good as we need to be with accessibility, but I do try to do some, a lot of it is based on like what I think is going to be accessible for people, whether they're, if nothing else, make the text bigger so people can see it, who are, a lot of people and have just trouble seeing small gray text on a page. So like, is it actually accessible? Run it through a checker to find that out. If an interface relies on a little tiny link that's hard to get to, like make it a big button, especially if you expect people to use it in a mobile interface ever with a touch screen, like make sure they can actually touch the link. So things like that are things I watch out for and just try to do a better job with. Like I said, we're not perfect with that at all. It's trying to get better with that all the time though.
Do you have any particular favorite analytics tools?
We've been using, and these are of course both privacy nightmares, so like take that with a grain of salt. We use Google Analytics for a lot of stuff, and we also use Inspectlet. Inspectlet is a tool that does heat mapping, and it does short recordings of user sessions. But it's we have like a free version of it, so we don't get a lot of sessions. It's only, I think it's like 100 a month we get for that, but it's still useful to kind of see some of that. And Google Analytics as well will give you kind of some of that heat mapping stuff. But what we'll look for a lot of times is what is the transition from how do people getting around a site, like do they click right to the thing they need? Do they have to click around a little bit? Things like databases, like if they're trying to find a specific database link, we know that's something that people want to do. We've made it really easy for them to do it. So we're curious to see like how many people are using the really easy solution to find the databases, or how many people are going the old-fashioned long way and try to track that. And it's sort of interesting. A lot of people still do it the way that they were used to doing it, that takes longer than the new way we set up. So I don't know if those are people who just haven't looked at the new thing yet, or they haven't gotten used to it, or what. They just like know that they have that thing memorized, so they're just going to do that. It's interesting. Then of course we have to, rather than once we've gotten that and we're like speculating on why is this happening, well then of course we have to then turn to the users, turn to usability testing to really kind of find out why that is. Do a survey to find out why that is. Kind of some of those more things. So yeah, those are the things we do though. Those two tools. And we have a small group of people who is we call the web team. And in the past, I don't know. I mean, when I say in the past, I mean like in 2004 or so, it seems like this group was a little bit better at kind of tracking some of the logs and analytics and things like that. But we hadn't been doing that for the last couple of years. So now I have everyone in the group involved in collecting different reports, getting into the analytics tools, playing around with them, understanding how they work. And then again, the whole group participating in usability testing. So we can kind of divide that expertise. So it's not just like in the systems department where I work, it's like the reference department can be aware of those trends as well. And cataloging can be, so everyone can kind of have a sense of how things are working digitally.
Oh, that's cool. You can have a way to like cross-train on usability and spread that knowledge. Do you have any way of mitigating the privacy issues? I've been thinking about those a lot lately because I'm doing some coding for Jason Griffey's Measure the Future project. And so far, a lot of this has consisted with arguing with him about privacy, which is a lot of fun. But it's a challenging problem. Like, how do you collect data in a way that is actionable and lets you improve your services without becoming a complete privacy nightmare? I guess with it's Google, you can't control what Google does if you're using Google, but do you have anything that you can do to mitigate that?
Well, I think you can. I mean, you cannot use all the features Google wants you to use, because I think they're really pushing a lot of this idea of identifying individual users and doing a lot more cross-site tracking of them for advertising purposes. And I think that the thing is, on the one hand, we sort of look at that idea in libraries and say, oh, that would be really interesting to know what happens with that. But at the other hand, I just think it's dangerous to turn that on. You don't know what's happening with it if you don't really, really understand it, and you don't really, really have informed your users what's going on. It's just too risky that you'll get information that you wish you didn't have. And I think we're not, and I know, like, I definitely am speaking for myself here, we're not doing a very good job of explaining to users exactly where their information is being used and for what purpose in the library. And I think it's a lot of times because we are not totally sure ourselves, like we haven't really thought about it. So I know there's been a lot of work being done out there trying to figure some of this stuff out, but I think it's sort of important for us to look back and say, like, okay, let's tell people what's going on. But at the same time, don't track something. If someone has to use the library to get their coursework done, don't track things about them that they wouldn't want tracked. Make it possible to opt out if at all possible. And what I try to do is just not record individual IP addresses of things that are happening ever. If we do have them, look at it only kind of at a domain level or a country level if possible, because we like to track. We have a campus in Italy, so it is kind of important for us to know who's doing things in Italy versus in the US. So like we have to look at, but you can look at that just from the very top level. You don't have to get even into like if they're on campus or off campus or that kind of thing. So I mean, we do, and like when we're doing actual usability testing, it's very easy because we can sit down the person and say, like, we're going to record this. This is how it's going to be used. Sign a release. That's really easy, but the rest of it is more challenging. So I just try to think, like, what's the worst thing that would happen with this data if I had it and someone asked for it, and what the worst thing is, or even a kind of bad thing, even if it's not the worst thing that could happen. Like, how big a problem would this be? And it's a really big problem. I don't even want that. I'm not even getting at that.
Yeah, not collecting data is really awesome for privacy, right? Like if you don't have it, you can't surrender it. It can't be hacked. It can't be subpoenaed. I'm kind of a fan of not having data if I don't actually really, really need it.
Yeah. Just think critically about what's the question you're trying to answer and get that specific piece of information. And I think, like I said, we can do better about telling people what's going on, but that's assuming they read it and understand it themselves too. So you have to just watch out for people, not just assume that they're going to like understand that you've told them what the implications are.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned your usability testing a couple of times now. You just mentioned going through it again. And that's one of those things that can mean anything from like a giant lab and lots of budget to like Matthew Reedsma's an hour and maybe there's some pizza, like kind of thing. So where on the spectrum are you in terms of testing? Do you have a script? Do you have a budget? Do you have like reporting? Like how much overhead are we talking? And what if people wanted to do their own, how could they copy you?
Oh, sure. Well, like all my best ideas, it's stolen directly from Matthew Reedsma. So
shout out to Reedsma.
Yeah. So yeah, no, we're kind of on that end of the spectrum. So what we do is we have a script that is taken from Steve Krug's book, Rocket Surgery Made Easy. So he wrote Don't Make Me Think, and then Rocket Surgery Made Easy is sort of the specific, like this is how you could run this sort of lightweight usability testing. So we've taken that script, it's on his website. I think you could just download it and use it, edit it. And we have a website people can go on to sign up for times for testing. And we do recruitment. Generally, we try to get newer students just so that they're not, as I say, corrupted by librarians yet. But it varies. Sometimes we'll have like student workers in the library who are working like front end, who they don't have any research experience. They're just sitting at the desk signing people in or something like that. So we can get them, but they're not necessarily particularly, they've never maybe looked at the library website in particular before. We also do offer a small stipend to people for doing this. So we can give people money if they're not working for the library already, which really helps recruitment. And they sit in this, actually the very seat I'm sitting in right now. We use the same room for doing the testing, and they come and sit down, and there's one other person, and we record it using Camtasia. And the one person sits there and asks questions. Sometimes I do have a note taker in the room, especially if people are trying to learn how to do the testing. They'll just observe quietly in the back and take notes and kind of see what I'm doing, what the technique is, so they can do it in the future. And then it takes 20 minutes usually. We come up with a list of questions. We usually have about 8 questions or so that we come up with ahead of time that are covering certain types of things we want to know about. We also give a chance for people to ask like, hey, like, why does this do this or whatever, give their general observations. And then we have the like observer worksheet that Steve Krug has, have people fill that out. The best solution, he says, is have everyone sit in another room and watch this over video conferencing. The scheduling for that is just not possible. It's just not something we can do. And stay sane. So so as he says, like if you have a video people are supposed to watch, they probably won't watch it. And we do have that experience sometimes, but we generally I edit the videos to take out any identifying information about people. Like if they type in their username and password, I just obscure their username so it can't be seen. And if they say something like, yeah, I work for the such and such desk, or like say something where like their boss could clearly know who they are, I take that out. Obviously, they might still recognize the voice, but at least they won't be as obvious. So I try to take out any identifying information, stick that up on our shared intranet or folder thing, and then people watch it and fill out the observer worksheet. And I take that and we pick like 2 or 3 things to fix on the website and fix that. And sometimes it brings up longer term projects that we, kind of have to then address. But usually we come up with 2 or 3 really simple action items we can take out of that to do that, and then go around for the next cycle. So we're not super formal about it a lot of times, but it's enough of a process. We can make some sort of data driven decisions. We were a little more formal over the summer when we were doing our new discovery layer, because we wanted a lot more people to weigh in on these decisions, and there were a lot more data. It wasn't just like, oh, let's make this button red rather than white. It was like, we need to think if we need to reload our data in a whole different way, or do something totally different with the way we're cataloging this one collection. And we did discover some of those things, but those are of course much longer projects that are it's not just fixing one thing quickly. but we do try to document what we change out of each session, so we kind of know, like, okay, we asked this and we got this good result and we're able to do this, or we asked this and it wasn't useful at all, or whatever, to show we're not wasting our time going forward.
So it sounds like you have a really strong usability culture in the library, and people have bought into this being a good thing. How did that come to be? Because I know that's not universal.
I'm not totally sure how it came to be, other than I've been at this job almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in January. And when I came in, I've been really big on usability testing at my old job, and had done a lot of work with usability testing. And so I was kind of used to that being a thing. And so I came in and I was like, oh, so is there any usability testing going on the website? Do we have any user data? And the answer was, well, we did a survey like earlier this year and have some information, but that was about it. And I said, okay, well, we're doing usability testing, so then we'll have that information going forward. So I kind of just was like, that's what we're doing because I was like, you hired me to do this job. This is how I do the job. So this is what we're doing. So that worked out well. But I think in general, over the last couple of years, the administration has become very interested in user experience, and kind of from like looking at it from user-centered assessment perspective of, we want to assess things, but we want to make sure we're assessing things not just on like, how much they cost or whatever, but like how they really work for our users. So I think I was just lucky to have an administration that was totally on board with that. And we've actually had a user experience kind of workshop for staff. We've had a couple of different staff workshops that everyone can take, not just for faculty librarians, but anyone on staff can kind of participate in these to learn a little bit more about how to think about user testing, usability, ethnography, all kinds of things like that. So I would say that the digital services are the things where it's happening the most, but we are aware of it in general, like what's going on. So I don't want to say, it's not like I necessarily changed everything just myself, but it definitely was one of those things where, again, when you start a new job, you're in your best negotiation time. So that's the kind of thing to come in. It's like, this isn't something we were doing. Like, this is a basic tool that we need. It's like, I need this on my computer. I need these programs. I need, I need health insurance, whatever. I need usability testing. So these are just things you can throw in when you're starting. But otherwise, I think you can always start small, and I think people are convinced pretty quickly if you have recordings and someone in power sees the recording and thinks something they thought was really great, they like find out from a neutral source. It wasn't you telling them it was bad. They found out from an actual person who pays money to go to school here that something is terrible. Then they're like, oh, okay, this needs to change.
So has there been anything that is particularly surprising that's come out of the usability tests, or things that have made people like rethink, oh yeah, the library website should not be like that. It should be like this other thing?
I think one of the main things that has kind of been an issue that I still don't think we've resolved, but it's something people were thinking about a lot, was like our research guides. Like, we have lab guides and people put a lot of work into them, and there's lots of ways people can get to them, but we would ask leading questions in our usability testing to try to get students to find a guide, and sometimes they could not do it at all. We've made it super obvious, like there's a really like can't miss it link, or not even a link, it's a drop down box of all of our research guide subjects, like right smack dab in the middle of the page, like you think you couldn't miss it, to try to get people into that. People are still sometimes missing it. And then when they get in, I was like, oh, have you ever seen this before? And sometimes they just have not, or they saw like, oh, I saw it in class, but I never looked at it again. And they look at it, it's like, this is really useful information, but they would have no idea how to find it or what it would be called. So that's something where I don't know if we've come up with a solution. We try to make it a lot easier, and I think it is easier for people now to find it, but then it's like communicating what it's for is a different kind of problem that I don't think we've quite fixed yet, or perhaps ever will, but I think we're getting better. We certainly have a pretty good structure in place to improve them, but that was something where it's like, okay, we really need to think about this. There's just like little things that have come up all the time, but it's just interesting how you think people are going to be so good at a certain, certain problem. You think, oh, they're definitely going to have no problem with that. Like for instance, finding a specific issue of a journal impossible for people. They cannot do it. And I mean, some people can figure it out, but most people, it's just completely impenetrable. Like, how would you find a specific issue of a journal? And that's something we really need to fix that issue. And I'm not sure, some of it, I think people just are not familiar enough with, they've never held an issue of a journal before. It's not like, I think if you went to school at a certain point, like you probably did have to deal with a print journal, and you may just not have to deal with it anymore. So people they can't even conceptualize like what's an issue of a journal versus an article.
It's all article level if it's online.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, even though the indexing is. I mean, I gotta say personally, like I had no idea how little I knew about library research and library services until my library degree, which was, by the way, my second master's degree. So like I should have known a lot more than I did, but I guess I'm not surprised that students don't realize that you have these research guides, because they solve a need, but the students don't know they have that need until they see the things.
Yeah, and unless it's like built into their, I mean, like I think some majors it's not built into it at all. Like I remember when I was in college, I majored in classical studies, so there were certain databases that we needed and certain things we needed to know, but I guess I learned a little bit about that, but I definitely know there were a lot of things I was missing. Like I definitely remember in college, like I had this concept, you could just go to JSTOR and like, that's where which I think was probably accurate for a lot of the research I was doing in classical studies and philosophy, but it probably wasn't, it was definitely like, I had the wrong concept of like, go to JSTOR and do a search there. It's like, well, that kind of works, but maybe there's some other things I should have been trying as well. But I guess you kind of rely on your professors a lot to set you straight then if you're going about things the wrong way.
I mean, I was also a classical studies major.
Yeah.
And I think my research plan was pretty much start the paper the day before it was due, because that was when I could motivate myself to do it, and use whatever resources were actually physically present and not checked out of the library, because it was due in 24 hours and that was what I could do. So like I had no idea that interlibrary loan was a thing, and even if I had, it kind of wouldn't have mattered.
Oh yeah.
Don't be like me, kids. I'm terrible.
No,
I'm a bad role model.
I was lucky to go to a college in Ohio, which has excellent interlibrary loan that's like really well branded. So like I think everyone in Ohio knows how to do interlibrary loan, it seems like to me. The other thing that as I went to college that really like independent study was a huge, you did a huge independent study project junior year and senior year, everybody did that. So some of those research skills had to be, it's like you're spending a whole semester on the paper. You can't start the night before. So you do have to have some of those research skills built in. And then like while you're writing on that paper, you get a carrel in the library that's just yours, and you can lock stuff there. So you could actually you were like next to books and you could leave them at your desk and stuff like that. So it was a little bit easier to do some of that in-depth research. And I also worked for the library, so I worked for the science library, so I knew all the science databases really well, which didn't help me with humanities, but at least I did have some clue of like, oh, here's where you go on the library website to like find the list of databases, because occasionally I had to show people that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was also a math major, which was really my primary thing, and we just didn't really use the library. At an engineering school, many of your classes just didn't have a library component. And I think that's probably different now. The library seems to be doing a lot more outreach these days. And I think the whole makerspaces thing is going to be great for anyone with an engineering school. But, I did problem sets out of my textbook like 24/7. And it just wasn't a thing that required going to the library. And so I didn't pick those skills up.
Yeah. Oh, that's definitely an issue. And that's like, I think part of the thing with my whole thing with, cause I also do, the other part of my job is open access advocacy and helping people with that. And so that's like a big thing in sciences. But what I kind of am looking for like this seamless research experience for people, that whether or not they've ever been to the library or know anything about library research, like what is going to be useful to them in their discipline. And so for the sciences, a lot of time it's like, how do we get people the stuff they need without having to go through a lot of hoops that are maybe make sense for humanities research that don't really even make sense for hard sciences or math or something like that. It's just a different world. So I try to look at that, but I'm not, again, that's sometimes we have to really rely on once we see the problem happening for people, but a lot of times we never even know that they're not,
Right.
that they don't have those skills.
Because they're not going to be able to communicate it if they don't know that this is a problem that exists. They can't tell you they're having it, or if they don't know that there's like a better alternative, then I can see why it is important to get people in a room and actually like see what they're doing and talk to them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Let's see. I know that I can only keep you for a few more minutes because you have a meeting going on. So I'm looking at my notes and trying to think about like what was the thing that stood out most that I really want to make sure I ask about. I think a lot of people will be curious. You said Drupal is your favorite platform, so why Drupal?
And I know that's not always a popular
I know.
answer.
So people will be really curious.
I think I first learned about Drupal in 2009. That's like, actually, it was about the time I started my first professional librarian position. Is like about the same time I started learning about Drupal. And I actually started learning about Drupal for the read-write library specifically, because we were trying to come up with, we wanted to do something with our content or that was not exactly what any other content management systems had, and that wasn't, we didn't want it to be super complicated. So we've been trying to do a lot of the stuff in WordPress that just was not meant to do it. Like you could hack WordPress to do it, but it was a real pain. It wasn't built into it. So Drupal is, it has all the things like, you can make pages and you can, have a front page and sub pages and menus and things like that you would expect in any content management system. But we found that the taxonomy builder in Drupal really helped us do a lot of things that just weren't that easy to do in other systems. So you can create as many taxonomies as you want, can have as many terms as you want. They can be either control vocabulary, they can be something that people entering content can tag as they go along, and then you can do a lot of stuff with those taxonomies in terms of presenting content. And it just did a lot of stuff we needed to do. So I was like, okay, I'll learn how to use this. So I really only had familiarity with WordPress before that. So I learned Drupal and we set up the site, and then I really got into it because there's so many ways to do things in there. I mean, you have to kind of follow the Drupal mindset. Once you're in the Drupal mindset of like, this is kind of how Drupal wants to present content and kind of how it wants to do things. There's a lot of modules and themes that you can add on. So you can do pretty sophisticated things without necessarily getting into the code that much. You do kind of, for some things you do really need to get in the code as well, but it's very flexible in that sense. It's very, there's a lot going on with it, and it's kind of really challenging sometimes to wrap your mind around all of the decisions that you need to take into account when you're saying, I'm going to do this thing. It's like, well, you think about all the dependencies for that thing, like really work through the whole problem to the end, or you're going to find yourself in trouble. But once you do that, it's very easy, and you can make things pretty well automated to kind of do what you want them to do. So I just really enjoy, it's like I'd spent so much time learning the Drupal mindset and learning all these different skills. I was like, well, I kind of want to just keep doing this now that I know how to do it. And it's still, I still feel like every time I have I think it's just because I have so many platforms I'm developing in right now, I get confused. I'm like, okay, this is how you do things in Drupal, and then this is how you do things in WordPress, this is how you do things in Omeka. And like, I can't, I sometimes have to sit there. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it's like, it's all PHP in there somewhere, but it's like, but then it's like, well, do I want it to do this? Is it going to be in this file? Like, how are the structure? What's the file structure set up? I can't remember a lot of times. So I have to like go and look like, oh, here's where everything is. So that is kind of a problem that I have, but it's a nice problem to have, because it means I have a lot of tools at my disposal for kind of, if a problem really shouldn't be solved in Drupal, it really shouldn't be solved in one other platform. Like, we have other ones available, so pick the one that does make more sense. So like, we do all our library blogging in WordPress, for instance. We don't attempt to do blogging in Drupal because it's not as easy to, like, WordPress is really, really nice for blogging. So we do all our blogging in WordPress and just integrate it with Drupal to get links to the content in WordPress.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of your stack was open source, which I presume is very congenial for hacking things together and making them do what you actually want them to do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of probably a lot of those decisions were cost over the years, but I think a lot of, because again, we do have the infrastructure to support a fair amount, not everything. We cannot support like a lot of the open source things we'd like to support, like repository software and that kind of thing. Like we kind of don't feel like we can support that, but certainly like the sort of more simple content management systems, we do feel confident in our ability to support those.
So you mentioned having a really good sysadmin earlier, and like shout out to good sysadmins because they make everyone's life so much better. But what do you think are the limits on your ability to support repository software?
Well, a lot of it is, it's not like we can install it. That's probably fine. But then it's like, how do we maintain it going forward? Do we have the mental bandwidth to kind of keep something like that going, as well as doing all the other services that are on top of that? So for instance, a good example is our institutional repository. So I manage the sort of content and policy side of that, and but our backend runs on Digital Commons from bpress, and I don't have to ever like touch that code. I can't touch it. It's very closed source, but it's something that like it runs pretty well, and I don't have to worry about it. So we can do a good set of services on top of that in terms of, getting content in there and helping faculty understand open access. We don't have to do all the other maintenance, versus like my old job, we actually ran DSpace in-house, and I did all of the development for DSpace, about, quarter of my job, if that, which is not really enough time. So I told someone that last week, and they're just like, that's not enough time. So we did pretty well getting DSpace running and looking decent and all that stuff. But we then also had to support all of the services of like open access advocacy and getting stuff in there and all of that, as well as then trying to keep the lights on basically with it. And then people would ask for features that we just had no way of implementing because we just did not have the time to do it. So that's the kind of thing where we sort of worry about some of those things. It's like, what is the real service we're trying to provide? And if the real service we're trying to provide is our expertise in like getting the content in there and managing the content and understanding that, does it make sense for us to spend all our time trying to learn a new software platform or new, especially if it's not a language that any of us have any familiarity with? Like, is it something we really want to spend that time on? And sometimes we do. Like, I think we're very interested in Hydra, and we're very interested in kind of some new things that are coming along that we'd have to expand our skill set, and that's fine. Like, we're willing to do that, but we want to make the investment in time, I think, with something that's going to be so huge and really change the services that we offer in a big way. We want to think that through thoughtfully, and like, what's the real benefits? Like, maybe it does make sense to pay for somebody else to do something so that we can actually spend our time offering the service the correct way. And I think, a lot of it's just like, again, like, even if we can install it, it's, do we, who is going to maintain it? And, like, how much more work can we throw on one person who's trying to maintain things?
So I feel like I desperately want to talk to you about like learning new languages and strategy and time management and all sorts of things, but I know that you have a meeting to get to really soon. So I'm going to have to let you go now. Is there any one last thing you want to say to the internet while you still have them here?
Oh, sure. I mean, I can just say, like, kind of touching on all of that stuff that you just mentioned all in one there. I'm very big on like learning new things, but learning them on work time. Like, structure your life so that you don't have to work at night. I definitely, and that's like work I've been doing. It's like the expectation that people should be learning, off hours. Like, I'm, as a lot of people know, I have a 2-year-old, and a lot of people have met my 2-year-old at conferences. I take him to a lot of conferences. I keep traveling. Like, I stay really active and stuff like that, but I also have I have to put him to bed and then watch TV at night and stuff like that. So those are other important parts of my life. So I think that's something I want to say is, like, when I do all this stuff, like, I really do try to keep it during sane work hours. And I kind of encourage everyone to, like, do the same thing and make at your workspace, that's like a normal thing to do. Like you're not working all the time. Because I think if everyone just kind of has that attitude, it does help make that more normal. So that's my last little message to everyone.
Our plea to the managers of the world.
Yeah.
Let people learn work skills at work. Yes. Well, thank you very much for your time. And I'll see you around on Twitter and conferences, and maybe your little kid too.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for being here.
Okay, bye.